First panel, because we want to move swiftly through our program. We don't want to run over time. So members of the first panel are Nathan, Ndubisi, Aisha, Eva, where's Eva? Oh, and Kelly is in charge. So, yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first panel of the day, exploring the student perspective on Pan-Africanism. My name is Kelly Emelle. I am a third-year law student at University of Bristol. I've been involved with PACE since the beginning. After meeting Larkai in my second year as the only black lecturer, I was drawn to her immediately, and then she exposed me to all the different conferences that other universities have held, so as Oxford, LSE, and we were lucky enough to attend some. And so, of course, when she told us about her idea to start one in Bristol, I was all on board. Me and friends and other volunteers have worked really hard to make this come through. And so now onto my panel and speakers. On the far left, we have Eva Larkai. She is a second-year medical student and is the newly elected BME officer at the University of Bristol. In the past, she has been an active member of the Afro-Caribbean Society here at Bristol, which is a society that aims to foster community in the university. And then we have Nathan Obayori, and he is the current president of the Bristol Afro-Caribbean Society. He is a first-year mathematics student and has recently been awarded the Mackenzie Mark Williams Scholarship. And then we have the infamous Ndubisi Offonry. He is the former, just left, president of the University of Bristol Afro-Caribbean Society. I'm going to be saying that a lot today. He's a second-year economics student and about to enter a year abroad, visiting both France and China, and is currently working on a development program for ethnic minority students and others from underprivileged backgrounds. Finally, we have Aisha Rana-Deshmukh. She is a geography student and has been the BME officer at the University of Bristol for the past year. She works as a student researcher at the Bristol Students' Union, where we are, and has been working to see research and find ways to confront the BME attainment gap here at Bristol. And she is the newly elected Bollywood Dance Society president. Thank you. Round of applause for her. So even though I just kind of introduced everyone briefly, I'll give everyone like a minute or so to kind of more information about themselves.
Just a minute.
Oh, as long as you want, Eva.
I mean, I prepared something, so I might as well just say it.
Say extra.
Okay, so excuse my voice, like it's not agreeing with me today, but I'll try and project as much as possible. Okay, so good morning everyone. My name is Eva Larkai and I'm a second-year medical student here at the University of Bristol. And since we're celebrating Pan-African identity today, I'd just like to say that I absolutely love being African. And in terms of my own background, I was brought up in London, but I have the privilege of being from two beautiful African nations, Sierra Leone and Ghana. So I'm incredibly delighted to have been part of the organising committee for the conference and also invited to speak as well. And I hope many of you would agree that the direction of PACE is incredibly exciting and refreshing, and actually the fact that it's launching here in Bristol, which, as many of you know, has strong connections to African history, makes it even more interesting. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about my experience as a black student here at Bristol and in the city as a whole. And coming from a diverse area in London, I came up to Bristol, which is very white, and I've been made more aware of my skin colour and ethnicity than ever before. And being part of a handful of black students in my hall of residences, and like one of 8 in a course of 230, you do end up being the tokenistic black person a lot of the time. And I don't know if you guys would agree, but you find yourself having to explain what your blackness means, and also being a voice for black students here at Bristol, which can be interesting to engage in those types of conversations, but also quite tiring and frustrating. I'd also say I've had experiences where I've been racially profiled while I was walking around in shopping centres, which is incredibly uncomfortable, and we shouldn't have to go through that sort of thing. And I found it quite hard to integrate in some groups. So for example, I joined the Bristol University rugby team, and I was lucky to quickly progress to the first team, but I ended up dropping out because I just didn't feel like I gelled well with the team. And maybe I should have stayed, but I just felt like I didn't want to compromise my own happiness whilst being at university. But I'd like to address things like that because no student should have to feel that way. And also, I guess on the topic of Pan-Africanism, I'd say it's quite a relatively new topic to myself, and I'd say it's something I'm still sort of forming a perspective on. And amongst my peers, I feel like there's this air of unintentional ignorance and naivety, which I don't know, I think in regards to Pan-African thought and the ways in which we can contribute to the narrative. And so for me today is about learning and hearing some of the ideas that have come before me and some that people will propose, and seeing how my role in the forthcoming academic year can sort of contribute to that and contribute to change. But sorry, I will hurry up. But some of the things I plan to do next year include a Black History short course, Black History Month short course, in collaboration with departments such as the Centre for Black Humanities, which I don't know if you guys know about, but it's newly established, and it's an interdisciplinary group researching the histories, art and thought of people of African descent. And I believe that it's a collaborative event which will it'll be open to all university students and also the wider community. But I'm hoping that it will help strengthen and establish the Pan-African staff and student links within the university and beyond. I also hope to drive forward new schemes such as that have been suggested to address the attainment gaps, such as Aisha has been involved with and will tell us more about, and also liaise with the career service at the University of Bristol to establish a means by which BME students can be connected to BME alumni. Because where are they all, and why aren't we connected to them? Because these are our predecessors and they actually look like us, and I think it's important for mentorship and also just being role models for what we can achieve. So yeah, those are just a few things I have for the coming year. I'm sorry to take so much time, but.
Good morning, everyone. So I've had a brief introduction, but my name is Nathan Obayori. So I'm a first year mathematics student here. So I've literally just started in September. I've had a good experience so far. So like Eva, I've come from London, quite a diverse background. But unfortunately, I had two very different experiences when I was going to school. So my secondary school was predominantly black, quite diverse in London. Then my sixth form was out in Kent, so it gave me kind of, it was on the opposite end of the spectrum, just put it that way. So it kind of prepared me more for Bristol. And when I came here, I didn't really know what to expect. I kind of picked Bristol as I wanted something different. I thought, I'm probably going to be working in London for the majority of my life. Let me go to somewhere totally different and see what it's like. So I've come to Bristol. It's been all right. There's been a few bumps here and there. You get a few dodgy comments, but it's all right. And one thing I find quite problematic is there's no black lecturers on my course. I do maths. I've not seen a single black lecturer. I am the only black person on my course. And in the year above, there's only one person on that course. So it's different coming from a place where there's a lot of people like you to a university where there's not so many people like you. So I'm also incoming president of Afro-Caribbean Society. So like Eva said, one of our big mandates is we're trying to push careers. So next year we plan to have kind of lots and lots of careers events. We're in the process of talking with sponsors and organising things. So last year we did have a few careers events. We brought in a few people. We had an event called Being Black in the Workforce. So we intend to kind of strengthen our careers mandate and kind of push forward to get more black people or more BME people into these kind of roles, into top companies. We also want to do quite a bit of charity work and work with the local community. So as part of that, we're thinking of an outreach program to local schools, because coming from a school in underrepresented, coming from a black school, secondary school, there wasn't many people who I thought, you make me feel like I want to go to university. It was kind of, everyone was like, let's do sports, let's do music, which is totally fine, but I would have liked the option to see someone else who was in academia, somebody who studied, somebody who made me feel like I want to go to university. So we're trying to change that by going into Bristol schools and trying to help help facilitate that. So I'm just looking forward to today. Pan-Africanism is quite new to me as well, so I'm also learning like everyone else. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Offonry, and in case you're trying to place kind of a country on my name, my full name is Ndubisi Offonry, and I am a proud Igbo man from the nation of Nigeria. So as you guys heard earlier, I'm a second year economics student at the University of Bristol, and my background is kind of a little bit different to most black students that you might find here in Bristol. I live in a predominantly white area in northwest London, and throughout my schooling, I've been going to predominantly white schools. But one thing that I'm sure we can all say as Afro-Caribbean individuals inside this room is that no matter what kind of area you're in outside of your house, when you're in your home, you're with your family and you'll be with your culture. And so I've just kind of been able to learn so much about my culture and be proud of who I am through my family, no matter where life has taken me. Here in the University of Bristol, I've been fortunate enough to meet so many different individuals, so many unique individuals that I had never met anything like before. So many individuals with different skills, different talents, and different experiences in their lives that have allowed them to be strong in so many different areas. And part of the reason why, as you guys heard a bit earlier, I became president of the University of Bristol's Afro-Caribbean Society before, was in order to kind of help these individuals to, bring out these strengths further, bring out their skills further, and grow together as a community, because I feel like as a community we can best grow and learn from one another. That's part of the reason why next year I am, with 2 other individuals, I'm starting a development program based in London, and the purpose of the development program isn't necessarily to push individuals into certain career paths, but it's to take a look at the skills of the individual, grow the individuals, and just let them know what's kind of out there in the world. Because a lot of us in this room, I'm sure we can agree, as black individuals, African individuals, Caribbean individuals, feel a large sense of pride and a large motivation to succeed. But in a lot of the time, that means that we kind of look at certain career paths or certain parts of life and try to focus ourselves specifically into those areas and those areas alone. And now in the 21st century, with developments in technology, all the different schemes and initiatives that are coming out year on year, now is the time for individuals to really be innovative and creative with their futures, with their careers, and really have success to find for themselves. So anything I'd say to anybody in this room is, we as students, we can learn so much from each and every single one of you. Each and every single one of you has done so, I'm sure I've done so many amazing things in your lives that might not necessarily follow the traditional path that is set out for us day by day from when we grow up. So just let the younger generation know your uniqueness, and that's it necessarily. So the panel here today, we're really excited to speak to you, but as you guys have heard from the other 2 speakers, Pan-Africanism is something that's quite new, I'm guessing, to each and every single one of us. So as you are learning from us, we will also be learning from you. It's a conversation, and we're just really excited to get the conversation started. So thank you for having me speak today.
Hi, so my name's Aisha Rana-Deshmukh. I was a BB officer this year with Shanti Joseph, who knows that. But yeah, again, here, I'm stating the obvious, I'm here just to learn and contribute the academic side of what I've done with the report that I wrote at the union. Being officer and writing the report just gave me an insight into the experience of people of colour at the university, and the focus on looking at the experience of black students in particular, that this certificate is mainly aimed at those students, and it's a place where we need to offer students as much support as possible. And it's just a pleasure to be here to speak alongside the speakers. Again, I'm here to just listen and learn, and I'm bringing like a small perspective from what I've looked at. It's more about what you guys have to say and because of the art. And I'll just be like touching you with a few key themes from the report that I wrote, but again, it's the voice of all the students I've interviewed talk to. It's their voices, it's their thoughts that you're not mine, and that's all I want to do. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again, speakers. So this panel, I estimate should take about 25 minutes. I'm going to ask the questions to the speakers, give them a chance to respond, any debates and discussions, and then I'll leave the question open for the audience to partake, ask the speakers any questions and so forth. And then I'll move on to the next question. I feel that's easier than having questions at the end because you want to remember what people said 20 minutes ago. Okay, everyone ready? My first question to the panel is, what would be your approach to decolonizing our curriculum as students in this university?
I think a lot of time I find myself outside this conversation as a medical student because I feel like it doesn't affect our course in a similar way as it does to humanities or literature-based subjects. So my perspective is either quite illy informed or not very I don't know. Yeah, but I would say that I think that demanding for more diverse staff, I think, because I don't know if you guys know, but BME students are overrepresented in postgraduate study, and I feel like there isn't the lack of those people as resources, but a lot of them just aren't getting those roles as lecturers, as teachers, and I feel like if people like that are represented at higher up, and they can influence in the curriculum and also sort of direct what they're teaching and plug some of those things in. So I think that would be my stance, and I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, similar to Eva, so I study mathematics, so in terms of my direct curriculum, I don't think there's a way to kind of decolonize my course in a sense, but there is kind of a way to get more lecturers, more BME lecturers in, and from what I've learned in maybe GCSE history, that's as far as my humanities knowledge goes back, I feel like sometimes we're given half-truths. So World War II, we're told about how many French people lost their lives, how many English people lost their lives, and how we were saved by America. We were saved by India, we were saved by the millions of African people who gave their lives. So I think it'd be good to hear from both sides. We also have we talk about slavery, we talk about how it's affected Western countries, how black people in America are finding it now, but we don't think of black people in Africa because it affected them as well. So I think whenever we discuss a topic, I think we need to discuss it in a holistic way from both perspectives, and I think that would do a great deal to kind of decolonize our curriculum.
Kind of just following on from what the other two have just said. In university, I feel like say decolonize the curriculum, unless you're talking about something like ancient history or talking about something like history, that's quite a kind of difficult thing to focus on. So whenever somebody kind of brings up the topic of decolonize the curriculum, I always instantly go back to the curriculum in primary education, in secondary education, at the point where individuals first taught about their history, first taught about the history of the world. At that point is where I'd really say the focus needs to be. The younger generation, the youths are going to be the most impressionable individuals you're going to find on this planet. So I'd say kind of focusing on use on the history lessons taught there, outside of slavery, outside of Battle of Hastings in 1066. There is so much else out there in history, so much that happened in Africa, so much that happened in other regions of the world. So just I'd say focusing on the curriculum of youth, and then naturally that will progress, and as they get older, and you'll see next generation rising up, you'll see a decrease in, I'd say, decrease in ignorance and a decrease in knowledge.
Yeah, informizing. We organised something called Why Is My Curriculum White? It's a campaign that the network runs. And I think, I agree, the journey starts from where education starts. With regards to higher education, I think everyone's course can do with decolonising. In regards to medicine, yes, where those discoveries come from. It's not just white scientists who are creating discoveries. The histories of maps, again, who made the mathematical discoveries. I feel like it's also, there's so much room for every subject to have more breadth and depth into where they come from and where we're getting our knowledge making, where that comes from. Is it coming from Eurocentric perspectives or is it coming from maybe perspectives? But I think that it's like diversifying curriculum, but I think because we do work at a research uni, it comes from diversifying staff. And for me, it's about bringing more people in, and that would like organically happen. And then more diverse topics come in, and people are more encouraged to take, take different units, and then they're less organised, they're less just an option on the side, starting first year. So for me, I feel like campaigns and working with the university community with regards to curricula can help put in more diverse perspectives.
I just wanted to add that I feel like, I don't know if you guys agree, but it is seeming like quite a long-winded process, and that's why I think, for example, the BME network in this short course that I want to implement in the coming year, I kind of want to amplify the work being done by researchers already who have done so much work in areas such as the involvement of African people in key historical events like World War II, and Black Britishness and Windrush and Scramble for Africa. Those kind of topics I want to touch on, because I feel like I don't want to wait until the curriculum is decolonised, but actually provide a means by which students can start to engage in the conversation and just that these concepts we put on their radar.
So looking into your each respective student roles you've had or are about to have, do you feel there's a place within that to campaign for or to further the discussion on decolonising the curriculum?
Yeah, so starting off as African-Caribbean Society President next year, I think there's a lot of room for us to kind of work together to kind of push this agenda, to kind of have more of a holistic view. So working with BME Network to try and push this short course would be amazing, to try and get some of these courses to have more of a holistic view, so we can learn about some of the history that was taught to us. We're also trying to get a lot more positive, I'd say positive history, because whenever we're taught about things, it's taught about in a negative light. Throughout my entire educational history, whenever we've learned about Africa or the Caribbean, we're shown pictures of dust, of just bad pictures. So I think there's a lot of good things that happen in Africa. There's a lot of philosophers, there's lots of great thinkers, but we're never told about those people. So I think as president next year, I believe that we can kind of help educate people about how many good people, what the good sides of the history in Africa, Pan-African.
Yeah, and just adding to what you were saying, just say collaboration is important. So us working with you guys and also with Centre for Black Humanities, with you, with all these other organisations, I think collaboration is key, because we're reaching the same group of people in Bristol, the same students, and I think the more we come together and share in the knowledge and experience in that respect, I think it's going to be positive.
Are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, it's just it's very interesting. I agree with the point that Aisha made a lot around that there is the history of the curriculum isn't really addressing postgraduate or undergraduate curriculum material, and it's about looking at from where some of the mathematics such as algebra came from, and I'm sure that can be unfinished. But what is interesting is to hear that you recognise that the foundation wasn't there. But it's really important to address also post-foundation, because those people who do go into careers that become, frontline maths staff, teachers or working in economics, will have that single-minded Eurocentric view. So it's really important that is embedded in exactly the positions where you are, not in the foundation. The other thing that I also wanted to add is also the link with, there's a lot of, so I worked at the university and I've worked on the project with life chances, and we looked at regulation and engagement. So it's unpicking why there's, no black teachers, or why is there a barrier for, Pan-African communities who are doctors and nurses and, researchers from the countries they came from, so there's barriers for them to use their certificates and qualifications and knowledge, and and we looked into that. So it's really interesting. We want to do some linking with the work that's happening in the research and the university, because that project is huge. It's one of the biggest research in the University of Bristol with margins. So it would be really good. I think there's a gap, but linking with some of the work that's happening already in the research that's happening in the university, with directly with communities and students at the university and the staff.
Thank you for that. Also, if you have a question, could you say your name and a little bit about you or where you came from today? You know, community building.
Okay, hi, I'm Marie-Elise Gourmet. I'm a community builder. I'm also an academic, and I used to work at you. I worked at you for almost 30 years. I work at the University of Bristol as well. And I think one of the things in terms of the question, I think one of the understanding is actually, the first thing is actually defining what it means, decolonizing the curriculum. And I think that's really important in understanding that. A lot of the answers you have provided, I totally agree with all of you. I think one of the key points that is really interesting is actually really starting to look at the kind of references that are offered on programs. And one of the biggest challenges that I used to lead on learning and teaching at the university at my last job, and working with academics, one of the biggest challenges, because when we say we can decolonize the science curriculum, we can decolonize mathematics, as you say, the kind of origin where they're coming from actually shows that we can do that. I think one of the biggest challenges that academics have faced is actually where to start, and their own knowledge is limited in terms of the references, all these readings. And one of the challenges I would like to throw at you, Eva, because of what you said you were going to do, and maybe all the panelists, is actually started to look at scientists, doctors, people from African-Caribbean descent, and reference books written by these people, because they can provide some resources that can help influence practice. And I think to some extent it's for many academics, it's actually challenging to go outside of what they know, but by providing them with the resources, that's a great place to start. Mathematics, lots of it. And it's not just in academia at higher education level, but also in schools as well. And all of that would, I think, be a really useful.
Thank you. My name is Maureen Mapa from the University of Birmingham. I'm in law. And I really loved all your presentations. And I really, the question is, so how do we do it? I like your contribution, the how. I think the first thing is know who can make change. So for instance, in our law school, there are two people who can make change. Directors of education, they might be called directors of teaching and learning. They're the ones who allocate teaching. They're the ones who will approve a module change or any sort of alteration or even a new module. So our director of education, for instance, wrote to me about 2 years ago and said, "Dear Maureen, I would like you to teach on such and such module with lectures and all on your research." And that was it. He made it turn into a decolonization by just one email. And up to today, it's in there. The other way is, if you're the one running the module, okay, where do you fit in African things? So I was given a module to run, cyber law, etc. And I found there is this African Convention on Cybersecurity and Data Protection. So now that is part of one of the seminars. It is one of the questions. And if you want to do it, do it. And then you will write about this convention and we'll sort of critique it. So then my task is every year adding more resources. And there's loads. When I look up articles written by African academics, there's more than enough. So, but then part of it, and I'll give you, it's the individual. Are you bold enough to do it? So when we encourage our colleagues in meetings, they will do it. They may feel frightened, but they tell them just have one topic. And that's the stuff. So.
Moving on to our second question. I'd just like to ask the speakers to project. Sadly, you guys don't get the microphone. So.
Actually, you can.
Okay, question, how would you suggest we confront the attainment gap? So I know Aisha has a lot to say on this.
Yeah, I just want to say I really agree with both of your ideas. Like, I'm currently trying to reform the curriculum. I do geography, and it's a lot of student labour that goes into it. Like, at the end of the day, these academics, they're really bright in their own field, but they're just white people, and they're quite basic in their knowledge of what they want. And often I'll meet with the tutors, and they're like, "Well, what do you want? Like, what do you want to see? Who do you want to do, like, in philosophy?" And I'm just like, it's kind of like, you know, they put you on the spot, and it's quite like, okay, you've got to come with it. It relies on us having a lot of inner strength, but I know that these people are amazing, and I know that we can do it. But it's just, yeah, a lot of your own work has to go into it, and yeah, you do have to know who your allies are in a department, and who is productive, and who's going to shut you down, or who's going to just tokenize your efforts, and so they can take equality diversity on their list, and who's actually going to be interested in making a curriculum that's actually engaging to all students of colour. So with regards to like engaging the attainment gap, like the reasons why I think it exists here specifically in Bristol, so my research was here at Bristol, home students, not international students. And like things that came up were feelings of isolation, students not being able to be themselves, and obviously you may have heard of all the racism that simply goes on at this university, it's very blatant. Things like mental health support, and obviously you know again, sadly, the tragedies we have at this university, but the fact that mental health isn't tailored, isn't like culturally sensitive to those students who need it. And then white curriculum and representation. So all these ideas come hand in hand. So for me, when we're talking about addressing the attainment gap, which we saw was 15.2%, so BME students are less, like 15.2% less likely to get a 2-1 or a first compared to their white counterparts. So we'll come into uni with the same A-level grades, but it's in the first year, which is where isolation mostly occurs, because we're displaced, we've come out of our communities, we're coming to this white university, we're displaced, and then essentially what it is we don't achieve as well in the first year, and then we're playing catch up for the rest of our time here, and then ending up with a lower grade compared to everyone else. And so for me it's like a combination of addressing curriculum, representation, mental health, and community, and it's a difficult task, but you can do it in small ways. So for me, being an officer, being at work, like making a student feel more at home or less isolated at university can be something to help. But then again, on the bigger scale, reforming a whole curriculum can help. And I think we'll probably touch on a lot like later on, but I think about like representation is the biggest thing for me. Like I'll talk to a lecturer and he's like, he's very like, on like, oh, we should include things in curriculum based on merit, etc., but he didn't understand that, yeah, it's great to learn about a person of colour, but also to see them teaching is a whole different thing. And I know that we'll maybe talk about encouraging people to come into academia and things like that, but it's so important to see a person like you teaching you about something that you can actually engage with. There's the whole reason why we saw that some students weren't attaining as well is because they're not engaging with their curriculum in the same way that white students are. In the same way, if you're tokenized or always painted in a negative light, then you're not going to want to do that essay, or you're not going to want to engage as well. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're not going to be able to achieve. And I think those are the key issues with surrounding it. So the things addressing it is really quite simple. Get more people of colour at this university and teach things that students can engage with.
So for this question, the one key area that I kind of like to look at a lot is the motivation behind the student. A lot of students kind of, when they first kind of enter university, the prospect of what you're going to be doing after university is still quite an abstract concept to them when they first enter. You're not necessarily coming to university. A lot of people say you should, but the reality is you're not necessarily coming to university a lot of the time thinking, I'm graduating and going to this specific role. And a lot of that kind of stems from not only the race of the individuals, but kind of their upbringing, their background, their access to resources and opportunities, and the amount of information that they actually have about what they could be doing in their future from this very point in time. So I can speak on behalf of kind of second year students. I'm not sure what it's been like for you in the first year, but for me as a second year, a lot of my time this year I've spent learning and then applying to internships and things like that, and seeing all the crazy amounts of grade requirements that are required to kind of enter all these great and exciting roles that I only really knew existed when I came to university or when I entered second year. So I'd say for the attainment gap, it's a lot around the motivation, but also the awareness kind of the students. So if the students the pressure of the students, that's what I'm looking for. The pressure that the students kind of feel under to succeed and at the same time learn about what their future career is going to be while they're in university. So I can say, oh, I'm an economist and I want to go into journalism, that me being an economist might not be the correct career for me to be in, might not be the correct degree for me to be in if I want to go into journalism. Hey, I'm already in this position. Now I'm feeling less motivated to do well in my course because it's not necessarily what, now I'm in university, I see what I want to go into later on in life. So I kind of just say, how to close the attainment gap. Focus on the, what are students going to be doing after university, and then kind of work your way backwards. Students kind of at a younger age don't necessarily know what kind of areas of life they want to go into, what career prospects they want to go into, those kind of things, and that in a lot of sense should be driving what you do when you're in university. So kind of just focus on letting students hone on strengths, hone on what they could be doing later on in life, and let that guide their kind of course choices, because then you're going to be more motivated to succeed in your course choice because you're going to be learning what's significant for you later on in life.
Just to add on that, my experience as a first year student, so fortunately I'm part of an organisation, I don't know where all of you have heard of it, SEO London, Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. So I think what they do is kind of something that we should try and do. So they give lots of training, they give lots of access to role models, which kind of, it helps you to kind of navigate through and kind of push yourself a bit more. Kind of, if I see somebody and I think I want to be like that after university, I'm more likely to try and attain what I need to attain to try and be there. And speaking practically, as my role of ACS president next year, so in terms of making students feel at home, that is one of our biggest mandates. We're trying to build a community for people to be at home so they can be themselves, so they don't feel like they've come to uni and they're just alone. We want people to feel like they have a community, they have someone to talk to. In terms of mental health, we've got a big push on that. Our welfare officers are constantly working, trying to make sure the welfare of all of our members is quite good, so they can perform as well as they could be. Mental health is quite a big issue in the university, so we really want to push and educate people and make them feel like they want to be here, make them feel that they can be themselves here. And another thing is we'd also like to educate the wider community about black culture, about things which you necessarily shouldn't say, things which would make a black person, BME person uncomfortable. We want to educate the wider community of things like this, because if that kind of unintentional racism, you could call it, or kind of discrimination, if that goes away, I'm sure that students will have a much better experience, which could lead to better attainment in general.
Yeah, I like everything you guys have said already, and you've given quite comprehensive answers. I'd say one of the things that I am working on as well, I co-founded a new society called BME Medics, because along the lines of what Aisha was saying about these feelings of isolation and I guess not being able to engage with some of the professionals at university, I feel like as medical students where the attainment gap does exist as well, it's important to foster that community where you can exchange some of the experiences that happen within healthcare, because there have been some real cases and situations that are just incredibly shocking, and I feel like it's essential to have a space like that, and also push for things that are required exclusively for black students and BME students who experience these things, and that also goes with sort of looking for and pushing for greater representation of BME staff within the mental health system here at the university. I'd also say practically, one thing I was thinking of and I'm looking to push forward next year is possibly implementing a study that's like longitudinal, based on first years up until third year, and looking at a BME student in comparison to a white student, looking at who have come in with the same sort of grades and on the same merit, and looking at what is different in their experiences. Because I find it quite interesting that I have the same access to resources, the same lecturers, the same academic experiences, but what makes my experience different to somebody who is white? So I'm hoping that through this study they can look at some of those key things and recognise what that catch-up entails. So I don't know if that's a retrospective study or prospective study, but I don't know, something that we'll look into that more deeply.
Thank you all for that, your responses. Just to keep in mind of time, I might not give any audience questions, but I will ask if maybe one or two people care to respond. What role do you think class plays in the question of BME attainment? Because I know in 2015 there was only 51 home graduates from Bristol, so out of the whole university, only 51 black students graduated. And knowing just the makeup of the UK, black people are more likely to be socially, economically disadvantaged. So in your roles and in your experiences, what role do you think the intersection of race and class may have on the attainment gap?
It's kind of closer to what I said before about kind of your access to resources and your access to information prior to entering university. And you said, as you said, like the, you know, there's a large number of ethnic minority, there's a large number of ethnic minority students, a large number of black students that are living in poverty, coming from low economic backgrounds, and that even in the schooling system, for example, might mean that whilst some students are getting, you know, lessons on how to network, lessons on you know, how to write your CVs and things like that. In larger schools, in schools with less funding, in schools with less access to resources, such classes might not be a possibility. So automatically, from the point where you're coming into university, some students have, you know, I guess a better standing than others when they're looking at internships and things like that. So I'd say the two in terms of class and race are definitely interlinked, but it's a lot of time into your access to resources and information before you enter university.
I think intrinsically linked. We need to remember that where we are, what sort of university we're at. Like, I noticed there's not only a class divide, but there's like a race and class divide. Like, a working class white student feels isolated at the university, let alone a person of colour who's also working class. Like, so I've never met anyone who went to private school before, but coming here, everyone in my course had gone to that, and I was like, it's crazy. Like, there's a huge divide in halls from first year, and like, I was supporting a student who was in Stoke Bishop, which is atypically, like, upper class students go there. It's like very like boarding school culture, etc., and like supporting them, trying to move them down to city centre where there's people of colour. It's just there is students of colour, black students in particular, have a lot to contend with because there's so many barriers, like cultural barriers, and then not monetary barriers. There's just such a disconnect and such a bubble with which working class students cannot enter. And I think that the university just ignores that as well. Like, we can say, oh, we need more BME people, but also there's a huge class issue and a huge issue of elitism at this university that I feel like people don't talk about enough.
Okay, moving on to our next question. So this takes a slightly different approach, perspective. I'm asking, to what extent do you feel the idea of political blackness, which is the notion that all people from African, Afro-Caribbean, Asian, or other visible minorities are oppressed by racism, should be collected under the term political blackness? So essentially everyone's black except white people. Do you believe such an ideology is a hindrance or a help to student movements? Just again, more background info, the NUS Black Students Campaign is based on the ideology of political blackness. So when they campaign for black students, they include Africans, Asians, and anyone from Afro-Caribbean descent. And there's been a lot of contentions in the NUS and in all universities about whether this should be the case. So in this Pan-African event, it's only right to see where we fall on the argument.
I think it's an interesting and quite a deep question, but I think as black people, we kind of struggle with representation at the top as it is already. So I think in a sense it could be quite harmful. Like, there was the campaign, is it the Black History Month campaign? Yeah, the Black History Month campaign where in Kent, was it Kent?
Yeah, when he's...
Yeah, it was Zayn Malik. Zayn Malik and Sadiq Khan were the face of this conference. I think for a community that already struggles with representation, we don't have enough people for our youngsters to look up to. We don't have enough role models. We don't have enough things for people to look up to. I don't think it's helpful having that. I mean, there's plenty of there's no disrespect to Sadiq Khan or Zayn Malik. I'm sure the work they do is wonderful, but I don't think it's appropriate in this context for them to be the face of the conference for a group of people who are underrepresented and have a few role models. I think it kind of gives a bad, not a bad image, but there's better ways you could do it. So I'd rather not, essentially. Like, yeah.
Sometimes I think that conversations around like the mentorship and like are quite futile because there are real issues at hand to be dealing with. But I think in some ways political blackness can be a hindrance in respect to the fact that that term sort of arose out of the issues that occurred many years ago, where everyone it was like an otherness type of term, so everybody who was not white, and we were kind of grouped in this category with the same sort of struggle against white supremacy and those racist movements. But I think now that the communities that fall under this politically black idea are sort of moving in different directions with different struggles. For example, the Asian community, there are real issues like Islamophobia that needs its own distinct focus, and then there are issues within the black community which needs its own distinct focus. I think in some respects political blackness can be a hindrance in not giving enough shine to those issues within the communities. By grouping everyone together, and I think that's my main thing, that you don't give enough shine to those issues, because at the US conference that you mentioned, it was so contentious. People around the name of the campaign and this idea of being politically black, and people are still not in agreement. No one likes the term. I feel like blackness is, I don't even understand what it means anymore to be black, and I just feel like it's, I don't know, I'm quite divided. But sometimes I feel like that, yeah, it is quite difficult.
I kind of guess that my point kind of leads with what the other two were saying. All of us in the BME community, we're going to have a number of struggles that are very, very similar. A lot of that, I guess, as we kind of discussed earlier, stems from our upbringing, stems from our background, stems from that can be financial, access to all those kind of things. But we are now in this day and age, similar in so many ways, but distinct in so many ways as well. And it's so important for us to remember that, hone on that, be proud of that, and not be afraid to fight the individual fight that relates closest to home, if that kind of makes sense. So I'd say the term political blackness in itself, when I first heard it, I didn't even understand the fact that it included, so many different communities, because whenever you see, the blackness, different aspects of, such a weird thing to say, different aspects of being black campaigned for, you always see it specifically to black people. So to now kind of have another type of political blackness still being used that encompasses everybody in this day and age, when there aren't such terms within other communities, if what I'm saying makes sense, I don't really resonate with that.
So I'm just building upon what you said and the question, as it focuses on student movements, so including the ACS, the BME. If you consider those to be student movements in some way, do you think they need to be made up of only black people then, or politically black members, or, I mean, not just members, but like...
Every single university is going to be different. Every single society is going to be different. The goals of each and every single society is also going to be different. Speaking specifically on my time as president of the ACS, what we have done this year, especially this year that wasn't really done last year, committee, I'm sure you can agree with this, was to make a real home for people here in Bristol of the African-Caribbean community. But in that sense, you can't just make a home and seclude yourself from the rest of the environment. You have to make a home for yourself and use your strengths, use your culture to educate and inspire people in so many, other communities. So in order to do that, yes, you have to have, your home here, but you also have to be willing to invite other people into your home, invite other people to learn about you, to grow with you, to experience you. And that's kind of just something that, I've been, working on so deeply this year. And we've had, I think this year we've had kind of the most members of any ACS previously before us, and that a lot of that is to do with the way we interact with the wider community. A lot of that is to do with the way that we have, you know, invited people and allowed people to grow. And it's just meant that, you know, outside of the ACS, so many of our members have been able to tell me, have been able to tell Eva, have been able to tell other members of, you know, our committee that they've really been able to find their home here in Bristol. And they've really been able to find their home, not just because of what ACS is doing inside with ACS, but because of the way, you know, ACS interacts with the Asian community, the way ACS interacts with the white community. And I just, you know, found that has been a positive direction to go in rather than a negative direction, because it just means that you're not just focusing on strengthening yourself here inside alone, you are focusing on strengthening yourself inside home and letting other people know that I am strong, that I am, you know, so I am creative, I'm vibrant, I'm so many things that you don't know, and I'm going to educate you and I'm going to keep on going. So do I think that it should be, you know, Black People Society only or African Caribbean Society only? No, because that kind of in some ways defeats the purpose of what the ACS or what the BNB network or other things like that should be. I hope that.
I think it's quite important that we don't go from one extreme to the other. So we're trying to avoid becoming like a society where it feels like only Black people can go to this society. We want it to be inclusive, because you don't have to be Black to fight for Black issues. You don't have to be a woman to fight for feminist issues. So if we kind of seclude ourselves, we're kind of taking away some of the people who can help us, some of the greatest influences as well. The curriculum as well, take it from the perspective of the curriculum. If it feels like a society where no white person is welcome or no Asian person is welcome, then how are we going to influence the white people and the Asian people who currently dictate our curriculum? So I think it's quite important that we remain open and kind of, so in a sense I don't think it's necessary that the committee or the members should only be Black, but I also do think that there's a fine balance, a quite delicate balance between kind of going too overboard and kind of losing your focus, but then there's also a balance between kind of accepting everyone and making everyone feel welcome in your society.
Okay, that's all we have time for. If we could give our panelists a big round of applause.